Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. The Kaneki Radio Theater is on the air. And tonight's episode is a near future science fiction episode taken in 3 acts. The future taken thinking of is 2028. It is the aftermath after many layoffs in AI caused by AI due to programmers and other things. A person who who's about in their 60s is thinking about a discussion they had with their father many years earlier. During the 80s, many people um, wondered why in the 80s why there's such an advent of computer virus software, why computer virus software had to be developed. And this person was talking with their father, and at the old house in Kenosha, they'd sit out on the back porch on a summer night and sometimes have different discussions about ideas in society and just different discussions going on. And part of the discussion involved basically was, well, this person's father thought, well, based upon a lot of the programmers that were promised jobs in the 70s and did receive degrees in the 80s, but now are being laid off and also being hired by H-1Bs and foreigners back then, working at 10 times the cost of 10 times less than a U.S. programmer back then, normally from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh. What it came out to is this person's father said, realized the reason why, part of the reason why for the rise of antivirus software is because when you ask people to create something, they give a lot into it. They put a lot into it with their families. They put a lot into it in the development. And what happens is when basically promises are made and not kept, um, they also have the ability to know how to use their knowledge the other way, and especially if they're made desperate. So my father always wondered basically when we used to talk was even when I was in computer science, that's why my father and uncle wanted me to go in business was because they were afraid that they were making out too many computer scientists, that computer scientists were a dime a dozen, or as I watched in one Apple TV series, basically, what was the term they used in English? Um, 10, 10 to the penny, 10 to the penny instead of a dime a dozen, 10 to the penny. So hyperinflation has caught up. Well, thinking back in 2028, um, I would wonder if I would wonder basically back then up to 2020, what would the future be like when you have a bunch of people laid off at AIs? Part of the reason why you're seeing a Barbie thing in the thing though is many people in this society, because of so much stress, have gone to doing Barbies and doll play, even as adult, which the Barbie movie showed. And the reason why the Barbie movie was so influential is because basically, it still goes back to a lot of people hate when I mention this, but still goes back to a 1968 episode of Star Trek on the Pleasure Planet. The more complex the society becomes, the more the need for play. But if you have it where basically people or the creative skills are used and then they're discarded, they don't have time for play and they're put in desperation, what's going to happen? End of Act One. In this second act, a person in 2028 is wondering about observing what is happening to society, and also thinking about what they heard in watching different videos in 2025. In 2025, what the common thought was those who use AI will make their jobs stronger and will be the ones that survive and not be on the layoff floor or not be laid off or fired. Well, by 2028, those who said that they're starting to get laid off even by 2026 and 27. However, many of them have student loans, many of them have debts, many of them have apartment leases, high apartment leases they have to pay for. Many of them don't own a home. They own multiple laptops, but they don't own a home. They don't own a car. They use a driver service to get around, or public transportation. So in essence, the only thing that they really own are basically the clothes and the laptops. They don't own anything else. However, in a society where basically people and computer skills that are replaceable by others have become more than just a dime a penny, and now basically a dime a peso. What happens? Well, basically, in 2020, people are starting to think about the idea of universal basic income. However, universal basic income can only go so far because you have to have so much production to justify universal basic income. Just like as the one person in 2000 is thinking about discussions in the UK where they're discussing their budget about having to manage how they're going to do winter fuel payments for seniors and other people in England, where they took it away and they put it back as they observed broadcasts from Sky News. Nowadays, and by 2008, people are getting their news more than from the traditional news media. It's more than just internet. It's actually through things like basically podcasts and other things. But also in 2028, people are sort of taking a step back, like many of the makers did, starting during COVID, about looking at retro systems as the Z80, the 6502, making their own retro systems, and wondering, well, how did we get off to such a creative, beneficial arc into such a corporate, a single-minded arc that leaves many people behind? And that's why the retro systems have become sort of rejuvenating point as a point of zero to try to start again, to basically as a counter correction, just like as sewing is a counter correction. Because another thing people wonder is, they see a lot of people who are creative that work in IoT, but also work in sewing. They make Barbie clothes, they make their own clothes. Even as some podcasts said, sewing is rebellion. And so it's not common now to see videos where people are watching and they see makers that make stuff but also do sewing stuff, and also sewing maker stuff. By 2028, this is becoming a bigger trend, and people realizing now that basically the trust that was put in consolidating big tech from what was considered the bad East Coast big tech to what was then considered a new friendly West Coast big tech. But the friendly West Coast big tech has become more worse than the big East Coast big tech ever was, because there's no oversight. With the big East big tech of the past, there was oversight as a special consent decree by the Justice Department and other things. But with the big tech of the West Coast, there's no consent decree coming even in 2028. So people are wondering, what is happening? What do we need to do? And people sort of realize that basically they're not surprised when they see more things with viruses between different things, because people who are desperate will do stuff if they feel that basically no one's going to help them. So people have to have help. But the thing is, the other thing is basically the way to do things is not through violence or basically violent means, because then that's going down to their level. It's to work on a peaceful level. So people realizing by doing retro maker stuff, doing craft stuff as sewing, sharing, doing community sharing, they're starting to see it. They're starting to see a path. So the pathway that starts to form is actually a very odd path. It actually starts with people who are adults who have a doll collection and they actually make clothes for the dolls and other stuff, because they are setting a way how to get around the aggressiveness and the massive hardship that some in society have done that are too greedy and that have hurt people too much in the tech field and also in income disparity and quality of life disparity. End of Act 2. Act 3. It is now later in 2028. Um, the idea of people playing with dolls as adults, making doll clothes and other things, is becoming more socially acceptable. But to those in the big tech that did the original purge of people through AI, they're trying to discourage this because they realize when people do play with dolls, they do share the sewing skills, they do share their maker skills. Um, this brings back a sense of community. This brings back a sense of worth. People start trusting each other. People start um, relying upon each other. You see lemonade stands where the kids can put out a lemonade stand. They don't need a license from the state or a sales tax license to put out the lemonade stand or a health department inspection. Similar to what was done in the 1970s in the early computer revolution. The computer revolution was not meant to basically ruin society. It was meant to help society after the aftermath of the Vietnam War and bad policies that came due to over confidence in the aftermath of World War II. But this time now, what happens though, it's starting with a different idea. However, the big tech is still fighting, the elites are still fighting, yet there's a formation of a third political party. Very basic from different American tradition, but different from European traditions, and that's only three parties, not multiple parties. So what do you do with the third political party? By the 2030 election, a new type of presidential and primary election is done, even Senate elections. With a three-party system, the presidential election is done in two stages. The first stage is to select the two majority parties that will go in the runoff election. And the runoff election is used to select basically the representatives that will elect the president. And same thing for Senate elections and House elections, as well as governors. Yet, other rules are put in place that basically no paid campaign advertising cannot be used to have the same constitutional protections as an individual. A reversal of a Supreme Court ruling many years ago that people thought gave corporations too much power. However, this is done basically on a step-by-step basis, but it's also done with a non-corporate basis, and so that basically you don't have boards and big tech taking over as the way they did by proxies and other things. A third part is that universal basic income um, has become prevalent and understandable because people it's now said that if you have a certain trade or skill, you're supposed to be guaranteed a certain income. It's not supposed to be who will work for $1, who will work for $2. And also, it's not supposed to be that you're pitted against illegal immigrants or you're pitted against other types of something where basically bad business practices pit the red ants against the black ants. So the struggle's still going on. People are still being impacted. But right now, by 2030, there seems to be some measure of help. However, the pervasiveness of the abuses that cause the discombobulation of tech and the philosophy from the original computer revolution still need to be changed and still need to be corrected. Those who are trying to do so are doing so, but it's been very hard for them and very hard for the families as they are pressured. End of Act 3. This has been a Kaneki a Diana radio production, and that what is presented is a fictional story, not to be construed with any type of current events, in the spirit of Orson Welles' World of the War 1938 broadcast as an adoption of when he did adoption of H.G. Wells' War of the War on NBC Radio. Also, this this presentation is done for entertainment purposes and education purposes only.